Fasted rides are something that many cyclists undertake, whether by design or by accident, as part of their training routine. Some who intentionally include these as part of their routine perhaps do so for the wrong reasons, and are therefore making some fundamental errors which are possibly negatively impacting on some of their other key sessions. In this video, I'm going to explain the actual purpose of a fasted ride, along with some tips if you're going to include these as part of your routine. Fasted rides, restricted carbohydrate availability, or glycogen depleted sessions, call them what you will, can be a useful addition to your training, but there are some things that you ought to be aware of before undertaking these. As I said in the intro, some people will be doing these unintentionally, either by forgetting or not having time to eat breakfast, but others will be deliberately including these as part of their routine. And speaking from personal experience, when I ask athletes what they're seeking from doing these, a common thread is weight loss. Sometimes this is fueled, see what I did there, by the athlete being aware that they will predominantly be operating in the so-called fat burning zone for the majority of these rides, therefore thinking this will give them the best bang for buck in terms of weight loss. Although the largest percentage of fuel you will utilise comes from the oxidative fuel tank, and you can see my previous video on pacing for more information about this, if you were to do some HIIT type intervals, not only will you burn more calories per hour, but according to a 2011 study, some people experienced an afterburn of almost 200 calories during the 14 or so hours after the workout ended. Then you will have those that are blissfully unaware of the fat burning zone and just figure that if they're burning a heap of calories on their ride and not eating during that time, they're going to be getting double bubble and will look like a racing snake in no time at all. And then when they get back home after the ride, they embark on some man versus food challenge, undoing a lot of what they thought they were achieving. The way that your body processes and utilises carbs is improved whilst exercising due to an increase in insulin sensitivity, meaning that your muscle cells are better able to use the available insulin to take up glucose during exercise. So, put fuel on the furnace when the furnace is running hot is a great analogy here. Those who starve themselves when they're on the bike and then become the cookie monster after the ride, as they're putting nothing on the furnace whilst it's running hot, instead waiting until it's died down and then chucking loads of fuel on, are then left wondering why they're not achieving their weight loss goal. So, if fasted rides are not really for weight loss or body composition management, what is their purpose and why do them? By undertaking RCA, which is restricted carbohydrate availability rides and sessions, we are seeking to further enhance one of those important adaptations that are brought about via those longer zone 2 sessions, which should be a feature of your training plan. By restricting carbohydrate availability, even for just part of the ride, we are looking to enhance our fat oxidation ability, also known as our fat max, thus driving down our tendency to use carbs for fuel at these lower levels, which in turn drives down our tendency to produce lactate, therefore contributing to help raise your lactate threshold. A crucial metric that takes care of a number of aspects of performance, and therefore one that most of us are seeking to improve, is your functional threshold power, or FTP, and it is closely tied to lactate production, tolerance and clearance. So if at one end of the scale we can take measures to drive down lactate production, whilst at the other end improve our ability to both tolerate and shuttle it, then the power that we are able to produce across this range will improve. Now we understand the why, let's take a look at the how. So depending on what, how, when you do prior to your RCA sessions will dictate whether it's been done with depleted liver glycogen and blood glucose, depleted muscle glycogen, or even a combination of both. Let's start off with arguably the most common and easiest to prepare for form of depleted session, the morning fasted ride. Liver glycogen stores and blood glucose levels gradually drop overnight whilst you sleep. So a fasted or RCA ride done the next morning will be done with depleted liver glycogen and depleted blood glucose levels. The second type involves training twice in one day and consuming minimal carbohydrates between those two sessions. The first session is the harder of the two and will deplete muscle glycogen stores, which means that when the second session is done later in the day, it is done with lowered muscle glycogen levels. The third option is called the sleep low. The evening before your RCA session, you do a high intensity session which depletes muscle glycogen stores, and it is then important that after the session, carbohydrate intake is restricted. So when you do your RCA session the next morning, it is done with both lowered muscle glycogen as well as depleted liver, glycogen and blood glucose. Okay, so despite knowing the whys and the hows of RCA training, it is still possible to get one or two things wrong, which might negatively impact your other key sessions. So I'm going to round things off by going through a few tips as well as making you aware of the few pitfalls that are worth avoiding. Number 1. RCA rides should be done at low intensity, as the objective is to improve fat oxidation and therefore improve your lactate threshold. Most research into RCA rides have been focused on sessions at the lower end of the intensity scale. Number 2. People who are new to cycling do have a tendency to be more glycolytic than those who've been doing it for some time, as they have yet to fully develop the endurance side of their physiology. So they tend to be more anaerobically dominant, and their type 2A fibres are adapted more towards their type 2X fibres, and because of this they tend to require more fuel during their rides. So if you are new to fasted training and or cycling itself, then much like any other form of training, start small and build up gradually from there. For example, start off with the first 30 or so minutes fasted and then start to take on carbs, gradually increasing the time in the fasted state but without going beyond 2 to 3 hours. And number 3. Resist the temptation to do too many RCA rides during the week, as you run the risk of outpacing your ability to refuel and therefore jeopardise the quality of your other key sessions that week. Although not directly related to fasted rides, this recent research from my alma mater, Loughborough University, where athletes performed a 30-minute time trial at 5 p.m. with or without having a breakfast. Those who skipped breakfast were allowed to eat as much as they liked at lunchtime, but despite that, they still showed a 4.5% reduction in performance, suggesting that when calorie intake is substantially reduced, even for a short period of time, the body adapts, reducing the number of calories used during exercise, which just goes to show how underfueling for a session can have knock-on effects. The received wisdom is not to do more than 2 fasted sessions per week. Number 4. Times to avoid RCA training are when you're ill, as limiting carbs can compromise your immune system, and during a recovery ride, because the goal of that session is to promote recovery via stimulating blood flow but without adding additional training stress. Fasted rides by their very nature add an additional training stress, so are in conflict with the aims of a recovery session. And finally, depending on the demands of the event that you are training for, such as those where having a propensity to be more glycolytic and therefore have a higher anaerobic power is advantageous, then RCA rides might actually be working against the physiological adaptations that are best suited to your key event. So there could be times of year when you are best advised to cease RCA training altogether. I hope that you now have a clearer idea as to the best reasons to do fasted ride sessions and the different ways in which you can go about them, and of course those all important pitfalls. If you know someone who does these types of rides and is maybe making a few errors, then why not share this video with them? If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave me a thumbs up or comment, and remember to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss out on any future ones. So thanks again for watching, take care and goodbye.